Hello guys, my name is Khan and in today's video we'll discuss that how we can use the date input functions in R Shiny. So actually I have already created a code file which you can see this code file for this video, but before going forward I will be using this data set. So I will open this data set and we'll discuss that data set first. So I have created a bit hypothetical data in which I have two date variables. So this data is about US Census. So I have created two variables. So here you can see that this date variable have a different format than the date2 variable which is here. So here we have day, month and year, whereas here we have year, month and day. And the point here is that there is a divider between day, month and year. Here is the backslash, whereas here we don't have any divider between day, month and year. So let's see, once we will import this data into R, how it will react to these variables, which data type these variables will get. We will discuss this thing a bit in the start, and then we will go then how you can use date input functions in R Shiny. Let's go to the file that I have created. So this is the file that I have created. So this is the code file I will open up, and then we will start discussing that how date variables, because I will suggest whenever you will work with the dates, be very careful, because sometimes if you don't put much attention on the date variables, you probably that can lead your analysis or your coding in a wrong way, and it may give you the results which are not actual, which are not according to the reality. So I will expand it up. So this is the data set that I have shown you guys. So let's see, if I import this data set into R, let's see what are the variable type those variables got assigned. Let's control home, control enter. Now if you go back to my R, so you can see the data. I have assigned that data to a data object data. So let's see if I want to see the variable. Here you can see that this date variable got assigned as a factor, but in the other date2 got assigned as an integer. This variable got assigned as a factor because there was having a subdivider and it cannot be considered as numeric. Therefore, R thought that it can be a factor variable, whereas date2 considered as the integer variable because it's more like a numeric variable. There is no alphabetic character, or you can say a punctuation mark. So that's why it's considered as a numeric variable. But while dealing with the date variable, it's a good idea to consider it as a date variable. So date format is also a kind of a numeric format. You can if there is a variable which is considered as a date, you can even do summations, multiplication. You can do numeric arithmetic operations over it. But the date format is a bit different from the integer, and especially when you will be doing time series analysis, it have to be the date variable should have a date format in it. So I will show you guys that how you can do that. So I'll go back to my data set. So the first thing is that you guys have known that date2 is an integer variable. In order to convert it into date format, first what I will do, there are many other ways that you can convert it back to date format, but first I will first convert it to a string format. And in order to do that, I have used the as.character, and let's so as.character is the function which I am using to convert this date2 variable into a character, and then I'm assigning it again back to this date2 variable. it's the same variable, so I'm not creating. If you want to create a new variable, you can create a new variable, you can name it something else, but I don't want to keep some redundant variable. So let's see if I execute my code, Control Shift Home and then Control Enter. And if I go back to my main window, you can see that the date2 is now character variable. So the next thing is now I can assign it as a date variable. So I'm using this character variable now, and then here I am mentioning that what is the format within that variable is that I know based on, if you look at here, the year part is coming first, then we have month, and then we have day. So that's why I have the sequence here is defined as percentage year, percentage month, percentage day. So now if I also execute this line, Control Enter, so now this date2 is converted into a date format, and here you can see that now the variable type is date, which I want. So this is one of the way, if you imported the data and your date format is in numeric, how you can convert it into a date format. But the point here is that my second variable, which is in a factor format, how you can change this variable into a date format. In order to do that, we will be what we will be doing. So, but before that, you can also, but suppose once you converted this date2 variable into a date format, after that you are not happy with the way it's showing me. Suppose it's showing me year, month and day, and there is a hyphen between these two things, but suppose you want the backslashes between year, month and day as a divider. In order to do that, you can use a function format, and after that you can mention the variable which you want to format, and you can say that okay, I want to see my date into this format. Here you can see that I have day first, month afterwards, and then year. So let's see if I execute that, Control Enter, and here you can see the format code according to the way I need. But the point, be careful when you use format, you will get the thing into a right format in which you want, but once after you format the date variable, it will turn back into the character. It's no longer a date now. So play around with these functionalities as.date or as.character and the format according to your need. And now suppose if the variable is in the factor format, if the date is in the factor format, how you can convert into the date. So it's very simple. We will be just using as.date. Here you will be mentioning that existing variable is in which format. So as you can see, the day, month and year is happening. So that's why I have mentioned date, month and year. So once I will do that, and here the important thing is that I'm using date format, date variable, which is in factor variable. So I will execute it, Control Enter, and now you can see my date variable got changed into date format. So this is a bit short overview that how you can deal with the date variable in your dataset, and especially when we'll be using date input function in Shiny, it's better to have a variable in proper date format. So before discussing further, I will execute the whole code to show you guys that what are the things that we will be discussing today. Let's run the app. Save selected. So this is a very small app that I have created. So here I have date input function, and I have relayed this date input function with one of the graph. So the first graph is showing all the data before that date. So if you can see that by default this date is selected, 24 January 1994, but I can select suppose 27. And an important thing to note here is that in this date input function, it's only allowing me to select the data till 31st January 1994. If I try to select any other thing, it will not let me do anything. Sorry, if I it's only letting me to select until the February 18. It's not allow me to enter something above 18 February 1994, and the minimum that I can select is the 31st December 1993. I cannot select 30th December 1993. I'm telling this thing because this kind of selection you have to tell when you will be using date input function in RShiny, and you can see that because I have selected only the one data. So because this data is starting from 31st December 1993, so there is only one data point. But if I keeps on increasing my data, so I will keeps on having my data points here now. So as even the title is saying all the dates before the selected date. So and my data is starting from the 31st December 1993, and so you can see that how you can. I will show you guys that how you can add this kind of functionality in RShiny. Mainly we will be using date input function, and here we have used date range inputs, in which it will allow me to select the range. So by default the range selected is 31st December 1993 till 18 February 1994. All the data is here. If you want to change the range, again my data, I can't select anything before 1993, December 1993, 31st December 1993, and I can select different things here. And as you can see, my graph got updated accordingly, and I can select my last date of my range too. So this first function is the date input function, and the second function is because of we use date range input. The first function is allowing us to select only one date, whereas the second function is allowing us to select a range of the dates. So let's go back to RShiny, and here we will start. So again, I'm using like before, like Shiny UI, using the fluid page, assigning it to a UI object. Then my title panel, I am assigning what I want to see in my title panel. And then I'm mentioning my sidebar layout. Within my sidebar layout, mention the position is right, my sidebar panel and the main panel. So first get into sidebar panel. So the first function is date input. So once I selected the date input, I will take you. So suppose whenever you deal with a new function in RShiny, so it's better if you go to help and select and write down that function here, date input, and enter it. And if you open it, you will maximize this window so that you guys can be able to see it properly. So I will be using date input function, the first function that I will use. Then I will be giving it as an ID that I will be using in my server part of the code. And then what is the label that I want to be appeared above that input function. And here, what's the value? The value is that what is the default value you want to opt. If I run my app, if I go back to my code, and if I execute it, run app, so you can see that by default it have selected 24 January 1994. This thing is happening because if I take back to here, this 24 January 1994 is happening because I mentioned that value as here to be appear. So the value is the default value to be opted whenever you will run the app. So the min is that what is the date the user can take, and what is the maximum date that the user can opt, and then what is the format you want to see. There are many other options that you can also see. There is a good description that you can go through, but I will be using these options. So I will close this window. I will go back to my code. So here I have used the date input. I use the ID, which is named as single date, because this date input function will allow me to only opt one date. And then I'm labeling this input function as select the date, and after that I'm saying my default value is getting from my data. So I'm saying the default value is the mean date. So because date is our date format is actually a numeric format, you can do arithmetic function. So by using the mean, I am selecting the center date of within my data. You can write down the date directly here. Then I am telling you Shiny that what's the minimum value of the date user can take. So here I said the minimum date appearing in that variable, and for maximum I have used maximum date. But you can alter these value minimum and maximum part according to your need. And then I want to see the format of the date as day, month, and year. And now I will discuss the date range input function. So the date range I have given, again I will take you back to the help part of R. So I will take here, I will discuss the date range input now. Date range. This is the function that we will be using. I will maximize it to discuss it a bit here. So date range input function is very similar to date input function. So here again you will be giving an ID that you will be using in your server part. Then what's the label you want to give that input box, and then start. So what's the start date? So what's the start rate what is the by default starting date range you want to select? By default is none. And what's the end range of your default date selected? And then what's the minimum value the user can use, minimum date that the user can take, and what's the maximum date that the user can take. So the first and start and the end is the default range that you want to select. The minimum and the maximum is for the minimum date or the maximum date the user can opt. And here again the format. If you want to play around with the format, you can change it here, and there are many other functions that you can use, but we will be using these functions, the first few starting functions, for this video. So let's go back to our code. This is the code. So we have date range input now, our second function. Then I am labeled ID named as range date. Now another thing to consider is that this single date is just a one value, whereas the range date is a vector with two values. So in order to tell you a bit more into details, so suppose if I create a vector. So if I create a vector like, I'm just creating a hypothetical vector here in my console to show you guys BB, and I'm creating a vector as 20, 30. So this vector has two values, 20 and 30, which is got assigned to BBB. But suppose if I want to call the first part of the element, I will be saying BBB and then using straight brackets first. It will give me the first part of the vector. And then if I use the same thing above, but now if I want to call the second, I will do this. It will tell me the second part of the vector. So this concept we are using again when we'll be using range date in the server, and the range date will be a vector with two values: the minimum range of the date you have selected and the maximum range value of the date you have selected. And again, I have labeled that input function in my Shiny. Select the range of the dates. Then the start is I'm using again the minimum from my data. The end is the maximum, and the minimum. So these are the default data range got selected when we run our app, and then you can change it according to your need. And the second part is the minimum and the maximum, which tells that what is the minimum date user can opt for, which is the maximum date you can opt, and you can play around with these minimum maximum values according to your data need and according to your analysis. And the second thing is that how you want to format it. I want to format it like this: day, month, and year. There are so many other formats you can play around with the formats. And before going toward main panel where I am exhibiting my plots, first I will go to server part where I will show you guys that how I generated those plots and how I incorporated the input date input IDs into server part. So here I've created Shiny server. I've used the server input output functions, and then I've created a first plot output one, and I've said render plot. So render plot will allow me to capture any plot that I will generate here. And here what I did is that so the first plot, if you guys remember, if I execute this app again, so whatever date I have selected here, it will show me the graph before till that day. So it's starting, as you can see, the 24th January 1994 selected. So it's showing me all the data before 24th January. So in order to do that, what I have done is that I have segmented the data. So I have I have stated that go to data frame, and if the data which is in the date variable is less than equal to input which we have selected through the date input, I've created a segment and then assign it to a new data object, data1, and then based on data1 object I have created a plot. And in the same way I have created my second plot, but this time I have used a range date input function, and as I mentioned, the range date input will be having two values, minimum date and the maximum date. So in order to do that, again I have used render plot. Again I'm creating plot 2 now, and have created a segment of the data based on the selection we have made. So I have said that select only those rows in which the input range date 1 is great, in which the date is greater than the input $range date which we have selected in our date range input function, and date is less than second part of the date which is capturing the maximum of the date range. But the important thing to here is that here you guys see that we have used input range date which we have created here in date range. But the important thing is, the new thing is that we have used the one which is calling the minimum part of the date, and to call the maximum part of the date we have used this 2, which I have also given you an example by creating a vector. What does it mean, how it works? And then I have created a plot, and once I have created this output plot 1 and plot 2, I'm using my main panel to exhibit it on our Shiny by using plot output function. Again, a plot output function. And if I execute it now, you can see we have this shiny app based on that code. So before ending this video, I will also emphasize that whenever you use this date input function, make sure that the date variables in your data is in proper date format, otherwise you may get errors. Thank you for watching the video.